In this class, we are going to learn about the second mass movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi, the civil disobedience movement. The time period of civil disobedience movement is from 1930 to 1934. In this class, we are not only going to refer to the time period till 1934, but till the time of 1937. Before moving further on, let's have a quick revision of what we have learned in the last class. In the last class, we have discussed about the Nehru report, the reaction that was given to the Nehru report by Indian National Congress and also by the Jinnah. We have seen the 14 points that were raised by Jinnah. We have also discussed about the Lahore session of 1929, which was a historic Congress session in the Indian national movement. The reason is that in this session, Indian National Congress declared that its aim is complete independence or the Purna Swaraj. Apart from that, in this session, the Congress also decided to launch the civil disobedience movement if the British government do not agree with the terms of the Congress. Before launching the civil disobedience movement, Gandhi gave a last try as a negotiation with the British government in the forms of the 11 points. In the last PPT, you can go through the 11 points or the 11 demands that were raised by Mahatma Gandhi. This was the final attempt which was done from the Congress side as a compromise not to launch the civil disobedience movement, but it was not receiving serious concern from the British side. So let's try to trace the civil disobedience movement and the events that led to the civil disobedience movement. To read about the civil disobedience movement, the historians have divided that period into the three phases. The first phase is from March 1930 to January 1931, which is called as the first civil disobedience movement. The second phase is from February 1931 to December 1931. This time period is seen as a negotiating period between the Congress and British government. And the third phase is from January 1932 to May 1934, which is called as the Second Civil Disobedience Movement. While tracing the trajectory of the civil disobedience movement, we'll come across that the first and the second phase was the peak of this movement. While in the third phase, there were a lot of leaders getting arrested, and the movement was withdrawn finally in the May of 1934. Before starting the civil disobedience movement, Gandhi made the last attempt to avert it through an 11-point demand, but this was rejected by Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India at that period of time. Among the 11 demands raised by Gandhi, the most important was the abolition of salt tax and the government monopoly on the manufacturing of salt may be done away with. The Viceroy did not take the ultimatum seriously and in fact ignored it. Gandhi elevated the issue of salt tax and brought it to the forefront. He declared his intention to undertake civil disobedience in connection with the salt tax and to lead a march to Dandi on the coast of Arabian Sea to break salt law by manufacturing salt himself. Gandhi launched his historic Dandi March on 12th March 1930. Gandhi, along with 78 supporters, marched from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi. This distance was to be covered in 24 days. Gandhi's method of march was a huge success and people participate in his public meetings in large number. Gandhi mobilized thousands of people across the country to volunteer to take part in the protest against the unjust law. The march received prominent coverage by native and foreign media. Mahatma Gandhi performed a ceremonial breach of salt law on the shores of Dandi on April 6, 1930 by picking up a lump of salt mixed with mud and formally inaugurated the civil disobedience movement. While manufacturing salt, Gandhi stated, quote, I am shaking the foundations of British Empire, unquote. Launching of the civil disobedience movement, it was a symbol of the Indian people's refusal to live under the British made laws and therefore under British rule. The program of the movement was as follows. Firstly, the salt law was to be violated everywhere. Secondly, the students were asked to boycott schools, colleges, and government servants were asked to resign from services. Thirdly, the foreign clothes was to be boycotted and burned. Fourth, no taxes were to be paid to the government. And lastly, the women were asked to stage dharnas at liquor shops. The movement spread rapidly. The violation of salt laws all over the country was soon followed by the defiance of forest laws in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and the central provinces, and refusal to pay the rural chowkidari tax in eastern India. Everywhere in the country, people joined hartals, demonstrations, and the campaign to boycott foreign goods and to refuse to pay taxes. In many parts of the country, the peasants refused to pay land revenue and rent and had their lands confiscated. A notable feature of the movement was the wide participation of women. They participated in picketing of shops, selling liquor and foreign clothes, and flocked in thousands to hear Gandhi speak. Another feature was the huge support of the business classes. They provided the finance and supported the boycott movement, particularly of foreign goods. The rapid spread of the movement left the government with a little choice but to use the force. In mid of May, Gandhi was arrested, leading to a massive wave of protest. There was major violent outburst in Chittagong, Peshawar, and Sholapur. The major outburst came from the Sholapur where the textile workers went on strike and along with other residents burnt liquor shops. Since Gandhi was never in favor of non-violence but looking at the violent outburst happening in India, Gandhi did not call off the movement, which encouraged the mass movement and led to a large-scale participation in the civil disobedience movement. All leaders and most volunteers were arrested, and the movement began to decline from September 1930 onwards as people lost interest. In a conciliatory gesture, the Viceroy suggested that the first roundtable conference would be held in London in November 1930, but the Congress boycotted it and it was a meaningless exercise. As planned, the first roundtable conference was held at London from 12th November 1930 to 19th January 1931 to deliberate on the Simon Commission report. Though some of the prominent leaders like Jidna Ambedkar, M.R. Jayakar took part in the conference, it could not achieve much due to the absence of the Congress representatives. The conference ended with the hope that the Congress would abandon the civil disobedience movement and participate in the second roundtable conference scheduled to meet in the autumn of 1931. Meanwhile, Mahatma Gandhi and 19 members of the Congress Working Committee was released on 26 January 1931. Sometimes after the release of Gandhi, leaders like Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, M.R. Jayakar, and Srinivas Shastri held a meeting with the Congress leaders at Allahabad and urged them to take part in the second roundtable conference. They also prevailed on Gandhi to meet the Viceroy to discuss the political situation. In February 1931, negotiations between the two started, as this is the time period of the civil disobedience movement from in the year 1931, which led to a negotiation between Gandhi and the British government. So in February 1931, both the parties, the Gandhi and the British government, started to negotiate. As a result of these negotiations, Gandhi and Irwin signed a pact on 5th March 1931, which is popularly known as Gandhi-Irwin Pact. The Congress at its Karachi session ratified this pact in March 1931. Let's look into some of the terms of this pact. According to this pact, on behalf of the government, it was agreed first to release all political prisoners not convicted for violence, secondly, to permit the people living near the seacoast to collect or manufacture salt without the payment of duty, thirdly, to permit peaceful picketing of liquor, opium, and foreign clothes shops, fourth, the remission of all fines not yet collected. Fifth, the scheme for the constitutional government at the center was to be of a federal type with reservations or safeguard in respect of external affairs, minorities, and financial credit of India. Fifth, return on confiscated lands not yet sold to third parties. Sixth, the government promised to undo the injuries inflicted on the individuals during civil disobedience movement, 7 to withdraw the emergency ordinances, 8 to withdraw all pending cases against the political workers, and lastly the lenient treatment for those government employees who had resigned. These were the points that were agreed from the British government. Now let's look into, as a part and parcel of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, there were some demands that were raised by British government which were agreed by Gandhi on behalf of the Congress. The first important point was the withdrawal of the civil disobedience movement. The second was the participation of Congress in the second roundtable conference. Third, not to press for the investigation of the police exercises during the civil disobedience movement. And fourthly, to stop all boycotts that are happening across the country. By signing the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, there was a mixed reaction in the Indian National Congress. Majority of the people welcomed the pact as a victory of Congress. Mahatma Gandhi described the pact as a victory for both the sides. Lord Irwin also felt that the agreement was absolutely desirable in view of the civil disobedience movement, which had greatly undermined the respect of law and order. But the pact had its bitter criticism as well, especially from the leftist leaders of the Congress who dubbed this agreement as a surrender to the government. Subhash Chandra Bose openly denounced the pact. Jawaharlal Nehru expressed shock over the clause of the agreement concerning safeguards in respect of matters like defense, external affairs, and the position in the minorities. Nehru considered this clause as irreconcilable with the Congress demand for complete independence. Likewise, in Britain, men like Winston Churchill alleged that the Viceroy had sold the Great Britain to Mahatma Gandhi. Despite the criticism of the pact, it cannot be denied that the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was an event of great historical importance. For the first time, the British government in India agreed to treat Indian National Congress on a footing of equality as a political opponent and entered on a prolonged negotiation to settle terms of peace. The British practically conceded to the Congress a status and authority to speak politically for Indians and consciously or unconsciously admitted its right to be heard on all future negotiations. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact was ratified in the Karachi Congress session of year 1931. In this session, the Congress agreed to take part in the Second Roundtable Conference, which took place in the year 1931. As per the agreement, Gandhi participated in the Second Roundtable Conference as the sole representative of the Congress. In addition, the representatives of Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs also took part in the conference. In his opening speech at the conference, Gandhi demanded establishment of responsible government immediately and in full, both at the center as well in the provinces. He also demanded complete control over the finance, army, defense, and external relations. While on the other hand, the representatives of the minority communities like Aga Khan, Zafarullah Khan, B.R. Ambedkar insisted on the recognition of the communal claims. They did not favorably respond to the suggestion of Gandhi that the question of framing a constitution should be given precedence over the communal question and insisted on the recognition of communal claim as a precondition for other settlements. Basically, in the second roundtable conference, a lot of members participated from India, some representing their communal concerns and some representing the Indian National Congress. Gandhi's objective was to raise or demand a responsible government immediately in the center and in the provinces, whereas on the other hand, there were leaders who were demanding the communal demands, which further resulted into a drift in the demands raised as a whole of India. But Lord Wellington, the new Governor General, had adopted a stiff policy towards the nationalists. He openly acted against the terms of Gandhi-Irwin Pact and arrested a number of national leaders like Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Jawaharlal Nehru, and etc. Gandhi sent a telegram to the Viceroy expressing his concern over the policy of repression. Gandhi sought an interview with the viceroy, which was refused. On 10th January 1932, the government declared Congress as illegal body and put most of the leading congressmen behind the bars. This is the time period when the civil disobedience movement was moving towards the third phase. Even those organizations which were remotely connected with Congress or were sympathetically disposed towards Congress were declared illegal. Again, reminding you that this is the time period when the civil disobedience movement is tracing its downward trajectory. Despite this policy of repression, the civil disobedience movement continued. People continued to hold meetings and demonstrations, notwithstanding the restrictions imposed by the government. Liquor shops and foreign clothes shops were picketed. People continued to violate the SALT law and even refused to pay taxes. But in view of the repressive policy of the government, the movement could not retain the enthusiasm and soon people felt depressed. As a result, in May 1933, Gandhi suspended the movement and in May 1934 it was completely withdrawn. After the failure of the Second Roundtable Conference, MacDonald, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, announced the communal awards on August 16, 1932. According to the award, the right of separate electorate was not only given to the Muslims of India but also to all the minority communities in the country. The award also declared untouchables as a minority, and thus the Hindu depressed classes were given a number of special seats to be filled from special depressed class electorates in the area where their voters were concentrated. Under the communal award, the principle of weightage was also maintained with some modifications in the Muslim minority provinces. The award was not popular with any Indian party. Muslims were not happy with the communal award as it has reduced their majority in Punjab and Bengal to a minority, yet they were prepared to accept it. On the other hand, the Hindus refused to accept the awards and decided to launch a campaign against it. For them, it was not possible to accept the untouchables as a minority. They organized the Allahabad Unity Conference in which they demanded for a replacement of separate electorates by joint electorates. Many nationalist Muslims and Sikhs also participated in the conference. The Congress also rejected the award. When the communal award was announced, Gandhi was in jail. When he came to know of it, he strongly protested and appealed to the British Prime Minister to reconsider his decision. However, the British government did not respond favorably. Thereupon, Mahatma Gandhi undertook a fast on to death to counter the mischievous move of the government. Some prominent leaders like Rajendra Prasad, Madan Mohan Malviya, M.C. Rajay, C. Rajagopalachari, B.R. Ambedkar held a meeting at Pune to save the life of Mahatma Gandhi. As a result of 6 days' deliberations, a compromise formula was evolved which was acceptable to Gandhi as well as Ambedkar. Even the British government accepted this formula, which is popularly known as Pune Pact. According to the pact, 158 seats were reserved for the Harijans in the provincial legislature as against 71 seats provided to them by the communal award. Election to these seats was to be conducted in two stages. In the first stage, the scheduled caste voters were to elect four candidates for each seat reserved for them. In the second stage, both the Hindus and the Harijans were to vote jointly and elect one candidate out of these four persons. In addition to this, the Harijans were given additional vote in the election of candidates from general seats. As a result of this agreement, joint electorates were maintained for the scheduled caste and Hindus. The constitutional history of India took a major turn when the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced his communal award in 1932. After the Pune Pact was signed, In the year 1935, the Government of India passed an act which is also called as Indian Council Act of 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 is stated to be a monument of drafting skills and constitutional insights. The significant feature of this act included the formation of All India Federation based on a union of the British India provinces and the princely states. After the passage of this act, we will be discussing about this act in a detailed manner in the next module. So for a time being, try to remember that this act is very important for the upcoming Constituent Assembly debate and the formation of the Constitution. And most important, significant provision of this act was the establishment of All India Federation. After the passage of this act in the year 1937, a general election took place, and in this election, Congress came out as the majority party to rule over most of the provinces. The Congress swept the polls in 7 out of 11 provinces. It gained a majority in Bombay, Madras, UP, Bihar, Odisha, Central provinces, and was the largest single party in the Northwest Frontier province. Congress formed its government in all these 7 provinces and ruled for 28 months. In the next presentation, we will learn about the August Offer, the Cripps Mission, and the Quit India movement. These negotiations which are going to come from year 1939 will be also helpful in the partition of Indian trajectory. So if you have doubts till now about any topic that we have discussed, you can mail me your queries on asmita.jataria1994@gmail.com. I'll be sending out the reading materials to understand um, the topics if you have any doubts.